This is finally happening. I can't
so
wait.
excited to be here.
I'm so happy that you are here. And first of all, like, cheers out there.
Cheers.
We are having cocktails. Jenna, what are you having?
Well, to be honest, it's 11 o'clock in the morning here and I'm at work. So I'm having coffee, but it is in a wine glass. So
It is in a wine glass, exactly. And so, I'm from Scandinavia, and there's sometimes we say when it's 11, you can actually have a drink.
See, I should be moving to Scandinavia.
Exactly. You should be moving to Scandinavia. But anyway, you folks who
So
are
skål.
joining us, skål. Skål, yes. We hope you are here with a cocktail. It doesn't have to be alcoholic. It could be like milk, coffee, a shrimp cocktail even. But this is Cocktails and Courageous Conversations. I'm here with Jenna. And why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Jenna LeJeune. I'm a psychologist in Portland, Oregon. And I am mostly a clinician. So that's how I spend the vast majority of my time, but I also help run a mental health clinic here and do trainings and supervision and that sort of stuff. So that's me.
Wonderful.
And I am passionate about the idea of values and getting to help people live a more meaningful life through kind of using values.
Cool. Okay, Anya, you wrote a book.
And
I wrote a book, and you have it with you. I ordered it. I just told you before. I ordered it, and it hasn't arrived. And I've been harassing the, sales people. Could you just flash us the book?
I will.
There it is. There it is. And I will make sure to put a link to it in the comments, like afterwards. So you don't want to miss this book. It's, I haven't read it, obviously, but I know you, and I know it is amazing. So Jenna, before we start, there's something I want to, this is very personal to me. Like, I invite people that I just truly love and adore, and I'm so honored that you came here. And you have had a big impact in my life in many ways. And one of the things, when I say turtle power, you know what I mean. And so, do you mind sharing with folks out there what turtle power now means?
It's so funny that has impacted folks. But yes, so turtle power is kind of the short version of it. Is I was on a trek through the Himalaya, and if you know anything about me, if you were to just like meet me, there's no possible way you would say, oh, that's a Himalayan mountain climber there. I'm sure that's what she does. Like that, it is just really way outside of my comfort zone, and not what I would choose to do if it were just about like what I want to do. I would be in the hotel drinking a glass of wine. But I had some really important values-based reasons why I went on this trek. And it was so hard. I mean, it was so painful. And what happened was I got to Kathmandu, and I looked up and I saw these gigantic mountains. And I thought, there's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to do this. Like, I'm just going to turn in. And then I realized I don't have to climb that entire mountain. What I have to do is I have to take the next smallest step. And I just have to keep taking the next smallest step. And so I was trekking with a bunch of people, and my sort of pace was very, very slow. But I just kept going and kept going and kept going. And so people sort of nicknamed me Turtle Power because I just kind of kept going. And actually, the part I'm most proud of is on the very hardest day of the hike, I was what we called the pace car. So I was the one in the front of the pack because they knew I would go slow, but I would get us to the top of the hill. So that's Turtle Power. And I made it.
And you made it. And I also heard that sometimes, you actually not only did you, take the lead, but also on the days when you were in the back as you were walking, actually, when you came to the top, you were the first because people were like exhausted.
Oh, Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that, that's part of my strategy too, is I just am going to set my own pace. I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other. So, yeah.
And and the reason why you've impacted my life in so many ways, first of all, I've been to your trainings, just want to say that, and they are awesome. And then I know you, and you are awesome. But the turtle power thing is, I think it translates into values like taking, turtle power steps, and adjusting your pace to the environment, and then you'll get there. And then as some people who are listening might know as well, I went then to Himalaya. I think it was a year after you.
Yeah.
And I went because I saw that you went, and I was like, if these guys can do it, then I want to do it as well. And as you said, it was so hard. And just before we started, our mutual friend Louise Hayes, who organizes these, she was telling me about you and Turtle Power. And Jenna, that literally helped me as I was on the mountain ready to like order a helicopter to come. I was like, there's no way. Yeah. I kind of imagine, first of all, I just kept saying Turtle Power, and I imagine like you holding my hand, and the two of us walking like slowly, and I'm like, okay, we might be slow, but we'll get there before the sun goes down, or something like that.
Absolutely. And I think, one thing about Turtle Power as well is we can get, or at least I can, and people, I think humans work this way, we can kind of get caught up in these stories like, oh, I'm not the kind of person who can do this. And, I had that story about me. I'm not the kind of person who hikes the Himalaya. I'm a different kind of person. And so one of the things about values is that it allowed me the choice to be the kind of person I would choose to be if I were free to choose. It's not like predetermined. And so just kind of breaking outside of that story and saying like, I'm going to do this thing, and I need help, and I need support in doing it. Like you had me visualized me there, but I had my Sherpas and my co-Turtle Power friend Jen right next to me, and we need help when life gives us the really difficult things to know how to keep moving forward and keep our eye on what is most important. And that's, in my opinion, that's what values are about. Wow. Being able to keep your eye on what is most important and keep going in living the kind of life you would choose to live, even when it feels so difficult, even when there are barriers.
Yeah. And I like the part that you say that it can be difficult. And, most often values, it is difficult because, if it was, it's rarely ever that easy. It's there are all these barriers. But tell me a little bit, Jenna, what is it? You're very passionate about values. And how does one know, how do I know what my values are?
Well, the way that I think about it is, I think most people think of it as I have to discover it, I have to uncover something, and I don't see it that way. I see it as a process of choosing. And sometimes we have to strip away a lot of the shoulds and stories that we have in our life about like, well, I should value this or I should value that, to get to a place where you could freely choose. But that's how you, I think, kind of orient around values, is you go through a reflective process around, when I strip away everything else, what is most meaningful. And you can do that in ways like reflect back on your life in the places where you feel most proud. What qualities were you embodying in those times? You can think about the other people that you really admire. You can think about the end of your life and what you would want people to say about the kind of person you were at the end of your life. And those might give you some ideas about how you'd want to live your life now. Because values aren't morals. They're not like the right and wrong, shouldn't sort of thing. I mean, I think it's useful to have morals. I'm glad that there are morals in the society I live in, mostly. But values are about sort of what kind of person do you want to be in this world? What do you want to embody? So the kind of person I want to be in this world is somebody who persists when things are difficult, whether I'm on the Himalayan, plateau, or I'm sitting with a client that I'm scared to death they're going to end their life. Whatever the case may be, I want to be somebody who is willing to persist. So, for example, that's a value that I have, persistence.
Yeah. Wow. I can tell. And there's also this, let me just say that I think I don't know, but I would guess there's also, you say about how one wants to be in this world. And one thing I thought about when I think about you is that sometimes values can be expressed in like little tiny actions. It doesn't have to be like grandiose. And just another example, I didn't warn you about this, Jenna, but I don't know if you remember, I met you in, I've seen you in a lot of places, but you and I met in Montreal at a conference. And, at these conferences, there's like no time to talk to anybody because everybody's pulling you and we're, busy. And I met you in the hallway, like for a minute. And then you gave me like the hugest compliment. You said something that just, that was so sweet. And then because I was going somewhere and you went somewhere. And that just sat with me for, it still sits with me. And so I just want to, again, compliment you on the way you are in this world. Like, I'm guessing that one of your values is to be also a kind and loving person. You're like spreading love and kindness like it's glitter, and it just shows. So one of the things I admire about you is that you walk the talk. Not only do you teach and talk about values, you show people what, expressing values looks like. And I just want to applaud you on that. I'm a huge fan. I tell about this everywhere.
Can I follow up on that, Rikke? So you asked the question, like, how do you know what your values are?
Yeah.
And so when you just said there that you experienced me as this kind and loving person, like, I noticed there are tears in my eyes. I'm getting a little choked up. It is so impactful to me. And so to me, that tells me something like, yeah, that's who I want to be in the world. Now, when people will say things like, gosh, Jenna, you were so smart in that presentation. It feels good. I like that. That's a nice thing to say. But I don't have the response of, oh my gosh, like that is how I want to be towards other people. And so right there is sort of an example of me being able to say, yep, this is how I want to be. Next turtle power step towards kind and loving. That's how I want to be. And you always have the opportunity, like if kind and loving are two values, it doesn't matter if I'm at a super crowded conference or I'm checking out at the grocery store, or even if I'm in a fight with my partner. I can do those things in a way that embodies kindness and being loving. And it doesn't have to be the big, gigantic kind of gesture. So I'm very touched that you said that. And it really makes me feel great that you experience me as embodying those values that are important to me.
I'm happy that you were touched by that, and so was I. And I think that sometimes when you and I are both therapists, and when we work with our clients, some of the exercises that we might do are like imagining a speech, like somebody giving a speech or something like that, and just know that if I were to give a speech at your birthday party, that will be some of the things that I tell you. So, for those of you who are wondering, what are my values? That could be one of the things that we wonder, like how, if I met somebody at a conference or in, the grocery store somewhere, how would I like to be towards that person?
Yeah. And regardless of who the person is, I think that for me, at least, is also a good criteria. Like there are some people that I really want to impress, for example, and then, you know, something like being smart or whatever might feel really good. But I would feel so proud of anybody saying, wow, Jenna is a really kind person to me.
Yeah.
And so again, that might give you a clue about what you might want to be importanting or valuing in your life, because I do think of values as a verb. You are valuing something.
Exactly. It's in the
Yeah,
doing.
it is a doing.
It
It
is
is
a
a doing.
doing. And
Yeah.
so I think many people will ask me, Jenna, so what's the difference between, goals and values?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really important difference. And unfortunately, I think that in many of our cultures, we tend to be very goal oriented in the absence of being values directed. And there's nothing wrong with goals. It's just when they're not tied to values, they're sort of hollow. So the way that I speak about it is goals are things that you can accomplish or attain. They are, yes, I did that. And values are about qualities of behavior, who you want to be, like what creates meaning in your life. So like a classic example, getting married is a goal. I can check that box. Yes, I am married. No, I'm not married. Being a loving partner is a value. Like my partner, Jason, is never, ever going to come to me and say, you did it. You are now the loving partner. You don't have any more loving to do. You're done with that. You can check that off your list. Yeah, right. I can always be interacting in a loving way in that relationship. And so what I would say for folks is start with the values, and then goals are simply markers along the path to help you know whether or not you're probably on track with a value. And the great part about that is goals can get blocked. So let's say I had a goal of getting married, and let's say that wasn't in the cards for me. You know, fate, God, Buddha, nature, whatever said, nope, you don't get to get married. Well, you're sort of screwed then. I mean, to be frank. but values are always available to you no matter what your context is. So I could be in a prison and still behave in a way that is kind or that is loving. And so that's why I think that values, I really like control. So I want my life to be judged around the things I have control over, and I have control over my values. I don't always have control over whether or not I can attain a goal. So that's a distinction between goals and values, and why I think that values are really what has to orient us. And then goals are like good things to say, oh, good, yeah, I accomplished that thing.
Yeah. And so, and also, I see that values are expressed like differently over time. So, one of my values is to be a kind, loving mother. And so when my kids were babies, that was expressed in one way. And now, like, I have a teenager at my house, and there's like no way I can,
Don't try this at home.
Don't try this at home. So the value is still there, but the way it is, the way it's translated into action just varies over time, and it's very context specific, right? Yeah.
Yes. And like that brings up such this beautiful point, I think, in that values can allow us, living a life that's oriented around your values can allow a sense of consistency and stability. Again, that turtle power sort of idea. It's just, I'm going to keep going towards loving and kind. And how that looks is going to depend on the context and where I'm at in my life and who I'm interacting with. But I'm always going to take the next step towards loving and kind. And so in many ways, it just sort of gives a sense of, like, for me, it gives a sense of grounding or a centering in my life.
Sure. And so, cheers on that.
Cheers.
Skål.
Skål.
And so, Jenna, I meet a lot of people who say, so, my values is I want to be the best. My values is I don't want to screw it up. My values, another values is I want to be in control. Like it sounds like values, but what is your take on that?
Yeah. So one thing I would say, both to the therapists that are listening and also non-therapists, but be careful that you don't let the words sort of stand in the place of values. Like we put words around these things, like I'm saying I have a value around kindness. Like it's not really that word, it's how I'm living when I'm being kind, right? So these are behaviors, they're not words. But one thing about values is that they're always about moving towards something. They're expansive in this way, as opposed to moving away from what you don't want. And so when people say things like, I don't want to screw up, well, you're like, clearly they're just avoiding the feeling of whatever it is, failure, embarrassment, shame. And then even if they say something, if you were to say something like, I really want to be in control, well, first of all, you can either be in control or not be in control. So that's more of a goal. But I might dig a little bit more and say, like, that sounds like that's sort of oriented around a fear of what happens if you're not in control. So that might be, I don't want to feel scared. I don't want to feel anxious. And one way I will think about this, there's an old psychology concept called dead person goals. It used to be called dead man goals, but dead person goals. And you can apply this to your own life and thinking about values. If you're orienting your life around something that a dead person can do better than an alive person can do, then you're literally trying to be more like a dead person.
Yeah.
So if you think about who's the person that feels like they've screwed up the least, the dead person is never, ever screwing up. They have mastered that. And so if I'm orienting my life around not screwing up, even if I could be successful, the most successful I could be would be dead. And I think about values as being about creating vital, expansive, full, rich, bold lives, not dead lives. So that I would help people kind of orient around, okay, but if you were in control, what kind of a person would you want to be living? Let's say if you weren't worried about being out of control. Yeah. Does that make sense what I'm describing?
It makes
okay.
Total sense. And, I really love that the way, you separate going towards something instead of going, removing yourself from something that you don't want. Because that's a totally different function, right?
I'll often use this analogy with folks. Values are a little bit like, I'm a foodie and I really love cheese. So values are a little bit like stinky cheese to a rat. So if you want a rat to like go through a maze in a particular way, you can either shock the rat to get the rat to move away from the shock, or you could put a big hunk of stinky Stilton at the end of the maze. And no matter what barriers show up, the rat is just always going to be craving, always going to be moving towards that stinky cheese. And values in my life, they're sort of my stinky cheese. They're the thing that I'm constantly driving towards because it's just what pulls me. It's appetitive to me. So it's about moving towards rather than getting away from the shocks of life.
Exactly. I love that stinky cheese metaphor. Cheers to that, Jenna.
Cheers. Oh, we should be having some stinky cheese.
We should be having, next time we'll have stinky cheese and cocktails.
Oh, sounds fantastic. Can we have it in the evening time, my time?
Oh. So I'll get up in the middle of the night. No worries at all. So imagine that I come to you and I'm like the rat. And we're talking about the stinky cheese, the things that, makes my heart sing. And I noticed like well, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I want to be a good mom, but my kids are too difficult. Or I want to be a loving partner, but my partner is an idiot. Like, what would you tell me then if I'm just like, okay, I can smell the cheese, but, you know, so I think these are actually two scenarios. One is it'll never happen, and the other one, I'm kind of waiting for somebody else to change.
Yeah, I think there is something that links both of those, and it's that you're talking about something out there, and then you're talking about, well, I would value this thing at some other time or in some other context, or if I were some other person or if they were some other person. And what I'm interested in is, what would you choose to value right now? If you were absolutely free to choose, what would you choose to make important in your life? And then what would that look like even right here, right now with me? So let's take I would like to be a loving partner, but my partner is a jerk. I might say something like, okay, but that's about some other time and place. If it were important to you, if you would choose to make being loving as a partner important, what might you be doing right now with me in therapy? Might you be exploring openly how you could be more loving? Or would you be putting up these barriers that you're doing? So it's about coming back to this present moment, because to be quite frank, you never know. Like, you could walk out of my therapy office and get hit by a bus. You don't know if you have that next moment or that next year. I know that I have this moment. And if this is the moment that I have to live, I'm going to choose to live it in a way that embodies kindness and loving and a few other core values that I have. And I'm going to let the future worry about itself. Now, as you said, values tend to be pretty consistent over time. And so my next turtle power step, like, I'm going to choose kindness and loving again. But I have to pay attention to what is the step in front of me right now, not in some other time or when somebody else changes.
I love that you pull it into the here and to the now, because this is where change is possible.
Yeah.
And also another thing that I love that you're talking about is the choosing of values. Like, sometimes, you know, when I talk to people about values, you know, I'm so passionate about this as well. Is that people are like, they're looking, if it's something inside of us, like they're looking for something that is hidden, and you have to discover your values and find them. And sometimes, you know, sometimes if you do look, you find them. But what happens if you don't? You start choosing, right?
You choose.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if this is true or not with the capital T. Like, I don't have a pipeline to, you know, God, Buddha, nature, whoever knows the truth. So for me, if I'm going to like make up the rules of this world, the world I want to live in is a world in which I get to choose what is meaningful to me. I get to choose what I would make important, what would make for a well-lived life. And so when I think about what values are, I mean, there's all sorts of technical definitions about it, but sort of a way that guides me is like, what for me would be a well-lived life? When I get to the end of everything and I look back on my life, what ways of living would be like, oh, I lived well. Like, I'm proud of the life that I lived. And I get to choose that. At every moment, I get to choose that. And for me, I've just sort of chosen, I think above all else, when I get to the end of everything, if I can look back on my life and say, people experienced me as kind and loving, or there is more kindness and love in the world because I lived here, that is a freaking well-lived life to me. And that's a choice I get to make. And other people choose to value other things, and that's fantastic. It's wonderful. But this is what I choose.
I'm almost crying here. And so what will you say to me if I said, so I want to do that too, and then I might say, but it's too hard, Jenna. So I want to be loving. And I kind of forgot as I just yelled at my kids or I just, yelled at my partner. So I know what I want. And then I remember it as I have a bad country, I feel bad for just yelling at people or something like that. Similar, I would never yell at any
No.
of my kids, of course.
Ever. You have always been loving.
I've always been loving, and I've just locked the door so the kids won't come and say anything else. No, but seriously, so there are these situations where we know exactly, so it's so, we know that we want to be kind and we know that we want to be loving or whatever else we want. And then we just don't.
Yeah. That's never happened to me, but I hear that happens to humans. That it's really difficult. And
Not us, but other people.
Other people. And I guess
the people watching, but the people that they know.
The people they know, right. And I guess I would say that's part of why we need to have some other tools to be able to deal with the pain that shows up around values, because values and pain, you cannot care about something without also feeling pain around it. It's not possible. And one of the things, at least that I feel the most pain around, is when I notice, oh gosh, I wasn't loving there, or I didn't treat that person in a kind way. It's really painful for me. And the very normal human response to pain is to turn away from it, right? To like, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to think that. And the best way to turn away from pain is to stop caring about your values, right? And so for me, when I'm experiencing pain, if I have been unkind to somebody, or if, I haven't been loving, I do have other values. It's just those two I'm talking about. Then the first thing that I try and do actually is I try and take a moment and say, what does this pain tell me about what I would want to make important? What does this pain tell me about my values? And then I sort of have a little bit of a moment of appreciation of, okay, would being kind be so important to me that I'd even be willing to feel this pain of when I fail at it and get back on track? And again, values are always available to you. I could have lived my entire life being the least kind, most hateful person ever. And then today I get to choose, right now I'm going to choose to take a step towards kindness, and then another step and another step. And how beautiful, how freaking beautiful is that idea? I mean, talk about the possibility for redemption. It doesn't matter what you have done in your life or what has been done to you. Or, I mean, that's one that comes up a lot for the people I serve. They say, I want to be a trusting person. I want to be an open person, but I've been hurt so badly. It doesn't actually matter. Nobody gets to take away the possibility of you living a life that would be worth living, a meaningful life. And that's a life of values. So I just say, it's a little bit like meditation, Oh, when I catch myself and I've wandered off, like, oh, cool, I noticed that I wandered off. And I come back to my values.
Yeah. What you're saying, Jenna, is so profound. Everything you're saying is so profound. But one of the things you're saying now is also that it's never too late. I love that you're saying that you can, because, many of us think that, oh my God, I've been a shitty person for such a long time. And maybe that is who I am. Exactly. And so you were talking about the choosing of your behaviors. I could have been a shitty person for 40 years and I choose this moment right now to be kind in this world. And also, and sometimes even choosing kindness towards myself, right? Well, not even sometimes, for me is to practice kindness in all directions, including towards myself. And another thing that I love that you're saying is also that when we're experiencing something difficult, so for instance, when I'm beating myself up for not, yelling at my kids or whatever, There's something important in there. There's important information because it's telling me also that I care. So if I yelled at them and and they were unimportant, I probably wouldn't care. So there's, in the hurt, there's information about that there's something that you care about.
Yeah, and you bring up something really important there. So in that moment, when you notice that you were somebody that, moved away from your values, you did something that was inconsistent with your values. So what would the kind person do? How would the kind person respond to somebody who has just felt like they failed something important?
Yeah.
And that then allows us to have a relationship with ourselves that even embodies our values. So I don't beat myself. I mean, I do sometimes, and then I catch that I'm beating myself up, and then that's not very kind. But like, beating yourself up is not practicing kindness.
Exactly.
And so if your value is to practice kindness, then the step that's in front of you right now is to be kind to the person that feels like, I failed because I yelled at my kids. And what do? You say, you sort of be the encourager on the Himalayan trek. You say, it's okay. We're going to take this next step, and then we'll take the next step. You got this. We can do this. Yes. I'm here with you. I'm going to support you. And even having that kind of a relationship with ourselves, rather than this evaluative kind of punishing relationship with ourselves, really can help us persist when we inevitably fail.
Yeah. And I love, the way that, so I keep coming back to this, the choosing of kindness and the way that we can choose that regardless of how people, treat us. So, I can choose kindness even if somebody's being a jerk. I can be assertive. Like assertive is one of my, one of the things that I am passionate about, and I teach it. And so I can set down boundaries, which could be a huge kindness towards myself, but also towards others. And just to know that I can live my values regardless of other people's behaviors. And as you said earlier, regardless of what happened to me and what people did to me, you can always choose to live your values in this very moment. It's such a powerful thing that
I think one of the reasons why I got so interested in values, or one of the things I think that keeps me so interested in it, is because, I look around this world and, I'm in the US, so maybe in particularly in the US, we have so many injustices. And it just feels so freaking unfair to me that certain groups of people get dealt one hand and other groups of people get dealt another hand. And it just seems like there's not a level playing field. And maybe the only thing that I have ever come across that seems like a level playing field is values. It does not matter where you have been, what has happened to you, what you have done, what context you're in. You still have the opportunity to live a life of meaning and whatever you would consider most important, a well-lived life. And I just love that idea of having my life oriented around something that is a level playing field for everybody, because at least in my world, that doesn't exist anywhere else.
No. And so, Jenna, what if I came to you and I said, so being a mom is so important to me, and working hard, well, not working hard, strike hard from protocol, but like being a, badass, in my case, psychologist, and doing a billion things. It's so important to me. So I have two areas and they're so important to me. And as I run full speed in both directions, it has kind of consequences for me. So what would you talk to me about?
Absolutely. So this, I would say this is one that comes up pretty often.
Yeah.
And I don't see, like, being a mom, being a badass psychologist, those aren't values. A mom, that's a goal, and a psychologist is a goal. You can do that or not do that. Those are sort of arenas in your life. They're like where you get to live out your values. And so when people feel this very understandable and sometimes inevitable sort of conflict, time management conflict, and demands conflict between these arenas in their life, acknowledge that is really difficult to know how to balance, right? But the value, how you want to be regardless of the arena that you're playing in, is probably pretty consistent. And so that way, I think what's super cool about that is if I'm at work and I am practicing kindness, for example, I'm also practicing being a kinder mom or a kinder partner because I'm constantly practicing the values there. So really acknowledging that there are time limitations and you're one person and people have competing demands, but but we don't have to choose between values.
And also, one of the things that I notice about when these areas are competing and, crashing sometimes is that, so what I talk a lot to people about is that, would I be willing to, for the entire day, choose to have my kids be a priority? Like, I totally engage in my kids. And when the bad conscience comes up for not then, writing a report or an article or something like that, I'm willing to have that. Like,
right.
I'm willing to be with that in order to right now engage with my kids, and on the other way, when I'm at work and missing my kids and feeling that I'm not with them, as you said, I can choose kindness at work and have that be about my motherhood. And also, I am willing to have that feeling in the service of right now, expressing values towards work.
Absolutely. And a question you might ask or people might ask themselves in this moment is, given that I'm choosing to be at work right now, or given that I'm choosing to be at home, and maybe it doesn't feel like a choice. So given that I am in this arena right now, that's the fact.
Yeah.
What kind of a person would I want to be while I'm in this arena? Because if you're at work and all you're doing is kind of ruminating, feeling shame, in this place of guilt about your kids, well, you're not actually with your kids either. And you're not being the kind of badass psychologist you want to be. Exactly. So the question is, given that I have this moment to live, and right now I'm in this arena, what kind of a person would I want to be in this arena? And then there are probably larger questions you want to explore with, a therapist or yourself about, like, how do you want to balance competing needs and, different roles in your life and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Excellent. Skål.
Skål. Salute.
Salute.
We got to be a little more international here.
Absolutely. Cocktails and stinky cheese. So I have so many questions that people ask, and
Great.
We might not be able to get around all of them, but some of them might even answer the questions that other people have. So one person here asked, so even if I don't know my values, can I still live a rich and meaningful life? Or maybe if I don't know all of my values, and how do I do that? That is a good question.
It's a great question. And what I would say is, I would work backwards. I would say, if from your experience, your evaluation, you are living a meaningful, kind of rich life, you are living your values. It is the definition of values, is like, that is what living a meaningful life is. And so you might want to work backwards then. You might want to say, okay, in this moment, this felt like a meaningful way of living. Or in this period of my life, this felt like a meaningful period of my life. What were the kinds of qualities that I was embodying in that time of my life? And that might help you sort of put the words around your values. But I would say, like, living a meaningful life means you are living your values, even if you don't have the specific words for it. And I actually, with the clients that I work with, sometimes my clients don't ever come up with words for their values. They will paint a picture that somehow represents their values for them, or they'll come up with a metaphor or something like that. And that's great. It's just, can you pay attention to what will sort of result in a meaningful, well-lived life for you?
Yeah. So what you're saying is I can live a total meaningful life and not exactly know my values, but if it's meaningful, something it's right?
Absolutely. And then what I would say is it can be helpful to be able to identify it so that then you can start having that guide your decisions in the future. So just work backwards.
Exactly. And so that it's more intentional than like,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Good question.
Yeah, that was great.
That's a great question. And so one here is asking, how would you know the difference so this is written in a different language, so I just got to translate it. How do you know the difference between values and rules? And what would be the right questions to find people values, both with myself and obviously this is a therapist that asks. I think we've covered this. Actually, you talked about this earlier, that there are the away, going away from something or moving towards something. And did we cover like when we have rules versus values? Did we cover that? Or you might.
Well, maybe I'll just say one thing about that, like one little exercise I might do with folks around this, because it's hard. Rules are more about what our particular culture or environment is telling us should or shouldn't be important. And it can be hard to know, like, do I actually value that thing, or is it just because of my culture, for example? So one of the things that I will encourage people to do is I'll say, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that you move to a culture that has the exact opposite value. So one thing here in the US, in many places, women being very thin and looking a particular way is something that is held up as important. Like, you're supposed to do this. If you go to Polynesia, for example, especially in different times, but certain contexts in Polynesia, it's the exact opposite. So what I want to know is, if you go to Polynesia and everybody is telling you, gosh, what you really should value is being more voluptuous, would you still value kind of having this thin body? Now, of course, those are goals that we're talking about, but you'll get kind of the example there of, like, take yourself out of the culture that is telling you that one thing is important. Put yourself in a different culture and then sort of check in with yourself. Would I still value the thing that I'm valuing? Yeah. Like, I happen to live around people. I'm very fortunate that I happen to live around people who are also really kind and very loving. And if I moved to a place where that was not the case, I would still choose kindness and loving. And so I sort of know, oh, that's my value. That's not just about the culture context that I'm in. Yeah. So.
Whoa, that is such a cool answer. So really asking that, and also asking what if you move to another culture, and also this, is it a should or a want to, right?
Yeah. So for that one, I don't know if it works this way for everybody. It works this way for me. If I do something and it's a should and somebody comments on it, I will usually feel something like, oh, okay, good, I did it right. Yeah. It's more of a sense of relief for me. Yeah. When I do something and it's in line with my values and it's commented on, I generally feel pride. Yeah. And so you might even just sort of notice the difference in your own response. Do you feel relief? Like, oh, I didn't screw it up, or do you feel like, pride, or how I felt when you commented earlier, like just touched? in a
Yeah.
particular way. I don't
Yeah.
feel touched when I do the like should thing. I
No.
never feel touched.
No.
So you pay attention to your own responses as well.
Exactly. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. So I have one here. It's pretty long, so I'm just gonna take out some of the. So we have one woman here who kind of. She says that she values self-development and acceptance, but it also makes her tired and kind of angry. And okay, so long. I think the essence here is that it might be I should be accepting, and I should be self-developing, and I should be I think this touches on the should. I might be misunderstanding this lady completely, but I think this touches on the should. And sometimes, do you have that as well, that people come to you and they say stuff like, so you and I, me, Jenna, we both work with acceptance and commitment therapy. So saying acceptance is sometimes like, well, I value acceptance and I value commitment and I value, therapy.
I think we're supposed to value those things.
Exactly. So there's like this, I think it touches on what we just said, like we're supposed to value these stuff. And sometimes and we might value them, truly. And sometimes when we take steps in these directions, it comes with a lot of consequences. I think this particular lady is talking about, her in-laws and relatives and people being not very kind. And so without you even getting the question, because it's so long and I should have read it a few times before we got on. But I think this might be more about again, choosing in every moment, regardless of how your relatives are, to do kindness. And also maybe looking at acceptance and self-development in a broader term, like the way I self-develop right now, does that seem to work for me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that's really key there, that one thing I know about you, or one way I have experienced you is, if I were going to put a value around it, it's something like badassness. Like I'm making up that word, badassness is not a word, but like there's just something about that word. Like that's what I would say is one of the things that you embody, right? And you happen to live in an environment where you can exude that in a certain way, and it's okay. If you were living in a different context and you were exuding badassness in the same way you are now, it wouldn't be very workable for you. And in fact, it might even be dangerous for you, potentially. Yes. And so we need to be able to shift our behavior based on the context. We don't shift the value, but we just say, okay, and then what in this context, again, what would be the most workable? What is the next step in front of me? So that's, I think, one point with it. I think maybe the other piece with the question, I'm not sure if this is addressing it, is developing some, in our language, acceptance or willingness around the feelings that might show up when we take a step towards our values. And one thing I'm thinking about is when I respond with kindness, for example, to, let's say, a client, somebody I care about deeply, and I open myself up and am kind in a particular way, and it gets rejected, like I feel pain. I feel sad. I feel hurt and rejected. So I don't choose to live out kindness because it always feels good. No. Sometimes I feel sad. Sometimes I feel rejected. Yeah. I choose to do it because when I think about the life that I would be most proud of having lived, sort of over the course of my life, a kind life is the one that I would be most proud of living, regardless of sort of the consequence of that in any given moment. Yeah. So maybe there was a little piece of that as well in the question.
Yes, and that, as this person talks about her relatives and saying no and being assertive and taking care of, and one of the things that I've noticed that I've kind of learned, I'd say the hard way throughout the years, is that I myself, and also in the conversations I've had with all my clients, have this conversation about, well, they don't deserve it. Like kindness is important to me, but well, they really don't deserve it. And the things that has changed for me as I came into Acceptance and Commitment Therapy Act that you and I work with is that, well, they may not deserve it, but I do.
Yes, I deserve to get to live a life of meaning.
Exactly.
And this is what a meaningful life would be. It'd be a kind life. So I deserve that life. Yep.
So exactly. Their behavior will not dictate, me being then unkind if that is not in my choosing. So I can always, we've said this before, I can always choose kindness even when surrounded by assholes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in some ways, like if you go back to where we started today and talking about the Himalayan trek, when you reach those prayer flags at the top of the summit, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Like when it's been the hardest day of hiking are some of the days where you feel like I did it. I feel so proud of this. And so sometimes the like choosing kindness in the face of assholes is sort of like getting that prayer flag moment. It's like I did that. Now I really don't want to come across like I do this all of the time. In fact, I don't even probably do it most of the time when I am surrounded with assholes. I am a human being.
Yeah.
And as everybody else that's listening here. So what I would say is the goal here is when you notice, would you choose your values?
Exactly.
When you notice. And then we develop some skills to help us sort of notice more frequently what we're valuing.
Exactly. And also just, talking about assholes. Cheers to the assholes.
To assholes. Yes, maybe you'll be kind.
Maybe you'll be kind. Stinky cheese and assholes.
Those seem to go together.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that people might say to me is that, does that then mean that I have to go to the asshole, some person who hurt me, and then, say, oh, thank you. And, that's not what we're talking about, is it? It's choosing kind, being kind there could be totally removing yourself from the situation.
Absolutely.
Or, just putting down a boundary.
Absolutely.
So kindness so talking about how can kindness be expressed in that very moment, that is it. Kindness towards an asshole is totally, for me, it's expressed so different that kindness towards my partner, right?
Absolutely.
But it's still kindness.
Absolutely. And this is something I talk about. I do a lot of relationship work in my therapy, and it's something I talk about a lot with my clients. It's like, okay, if you would choose to be a loving partner and you have decided to leave your marriage or your partnership, how could you be loving even in this process of leaving the relationship? And again, it's not because your partner deserves this or not. It's because you deserve to have an ending of this relationship where you were loving. And that loving might look like, hey, I'm not going to continue this relationship anymore because it's so toxic, or it's, you're not being the person you want to be. I'm not being the person I want to be. So I'm going to leave this relationship. That might be the loving thing to do.
Yes. And on that note, Jenna, it's been having you in my life is just wonderful. And I'm so happy that you were willing to come on here and spread your kindness and your wisdom to me and to all the people who are watching this. Like well, I figured you would, but you said yes, like instantly, and happy to do this. And just know that how I'm guessing that you will have an impact on so many people, as I know that you've had on me. I will make sure to put the link to your book in the comments, because I want people to go get your book. You know,
do keep in mind it's for therapists.
Exactly.
It's for them. Although I
It's
might be working on one for the public. We'll see.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. So when is your values for the public book coming out?
We'll see. The values for the public book has not been started, so maybe.
Well, no, I know you're thinking about it, and just know that we would greatly appreciate that. So Jenna, I'm gonna let's say cheers to all the people watching, and please, put, whatever, if you have questions or cheering or love, put it in the comments. We're gonna read the comments afterwards. So just, whatever comments you have for us, please put them down there, and just we're gonna go, on live. I don't know how to say that. We're gonna shut down the live. So
and here's to getting to create a meaningful life.
And to all the assholes.
And to all the assholes.
Cheese.
And stinky cheese. And
Bye,
turtles.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.